Good afternoon, fine people. All right, this is a rundown of a methodology of commonality or synthesis, a way of having a conversation with another in the hopes of synthesizing a point of view with them. So I want to start this with three principles, or loose sets of principles. The first would be humility or lock-in. This should be, everybody that's listened to me should probably be familiar with this. It's the idea of I could be wrong. And so you're coming to the other, not with the assumption that you're right and they are wrong, but with the assumption that you're probably wrong somewhere. And maybe they can help you figure it out. Maybe they can even teach you something you didn't know that was not a part of your perspective. Humility opens the mind. The left brain only understands what it already knows, but the right brain is able to see everything. The right brain is not linguistic, so it's not analytical. And therefore, humility is a practice, like a wisdom practice of listening to the other and hearing with civility and not with a preloaded simple skepticism. Save your skepticism for some other time if you want to do a commonality conversation. It's not the right time for that. It's a fine tool, but not if you're doing a commonality conversation. And lock-in means if you can't quite manage humility, then at least tell yourself you're going to lock in your current belief structure and then enter into an experimental situation in which you can play with other ideas, other options. And who knows, maybe you'll find yourself convinced. That's not a bad thing. It's not a bad thing to update your beliefs. I don't know, I really would like to analyze more or think through more when it is appropriate for a person to change their mind fully, like deeply change their mind from their deepest held beliefs. But it's a potentially world-shattering event, you know? I mean, you could potentially lose your entire family and friend structure through a belief structure change. So, I don't know. There's a lot that goes into that. But that's a topic for another time. Updating is all I'm considering at this point. And maybe not even that if you're simply locking in your beliefs and doing an experiment. All right, respect and civility of the second one. This is that you're not simply going to be civilized with them and not bark unless they first bark or not bite unless they first bite. You're actually going to treat them as if they are worthy of respect and worthy of your interest, worthy of your curiosity, and someone capable of teaching you something. And this, no matter how outlandish their belief structure seems to be to you. We do this because we're trying to find commonality, not because we're trying to win an argument, not because we think the other is... Not because you can disagree vehemently with someone and still do this process, I believe. Or at least you should want to. You should want to because that person isn't going away. And people like them are not going away. Not unless you deconvert them somehow. Or they just disappear off the face of the earth. You're going to have to exist in the same world with those people. And with things the way they are now, those people might be on the other end of a gun with you soon. Or at the other end of a food line. Or, I mean, what I'm trying to say is I don't think things are going well. If we don't change the way we're doing things in 50 years, it could all be over for us. I don't think that's an over-exaggeration. I think, well, anyway. Sorry. Honesty and optimal honesty and trust is the third set of principles. So, ideally, you're going to be very honest and very trusting with with the other that you're talking with. But realistically, you can't be sometimes. So the reason it's optimal and not something like maximal is because you are exercising judgment to decide how honest to be and how trustworthy to be. and how well, hopefully you're being very trustworthy, but how trustworthy the other one is. Now, this can be achieved in a kind of meta way. You can be honest about your distrust. You can be honest about what you can't agree with. And you can be honest about, you can trust that they will understand you when you say, I honestly can't understand that, or I honestly don't know how to believe that. That's a good phrase to use. I don't know how to believe that. I think that sets you up to speak humbly, but also accurately, as a person who has a lot of limited, not limitations necessarily, but problems that you think you see with their position. So the whole point is to open up the dialogue, to open up the processing, the mutual processing of ideas, to make a space where you can come together and solve mutual problems, bridge the gap between each other. Okay, so those are the three principles I'm working from. Now I'll go to 4 methods that I think collectively set the stage for synthesis. I guess there's four methods. The fourth one is synthesis. So the commonality format is one. I think I've spoke about this in a video, but the commonality format is something like believer X believes claim Y, or point Y, or position Y, or belief Y. So it is a format. So for instance, you say, instead of Jesus rose from the dead, you say Christians believe Jesus rose from the dead. Instead of saying there is no God, you say atheists believe there is no God. But you can also say something more common, more universal, like humans believe that all normative humans have an egg, a head, 2 arms, and 2 legs. That's fairly incontroversial, but we should celebrate it when we can find those points of commonality, even if it's only through that format of a commonality format. Granted, I don't want the conversation to stop at that. That would be rather boring and dull and pointless. Rather, that is a place the conversation can go in order to continue. That is basically how you reframe a absolute statement. If somebody throws an absolute statement at you, then you can be like, well, I can understand where believer X believes that, but I don't know how. Then you can continue to something like the improvement method. So the improvement method is, rather than merely stonewalling, being a skeptic and saying, how can that possibly be right? Actively help your conversational partner in solving the problems you think you see in their project. Hopefully this is not taken arrogantly. I could see where it could be, but I would like to think most people would be open to that. The reason I'm speaking like that is it just occurred to me that somebody might consider that arrogant. It didn't occur to me that until now. I'm kind of naive about those kind of things. But it's a suggestion. So I see this problem. Do you see that problem? And if they do, and if they're not know how to answer, okay, what if we frame it this way? What if we talk about it in terms of, so for instance, I'm listening, I'm hoping to have a conversation soon with an individual who's a Marxist, and he is speaking to me as if the only viable definition for the term class is a individual's relationship to economic productivity, the production of goods, which I find problematic, because that's not the only way you can stratify people by class. It could be by their social upbringing, by their genetic advantages. It could be by their preferences. There are so many things you can talk about by class, but he wants to only talk about this means of production class. So I can say, okay, I disagree that that's the only way you can think of class, nor do I think it's the only important way to think of class, but I can agree that that's what a production class could be called. So, reframe the Marxist idea into a smaller box called the productive class. I can accept that. And if they can, then we can continue with the conversation. And I feel as if my objections have been stated and included in the conversation. All right, so paradigm points or points of resonance. These are good to look for. You should probably ask permission, make sure, or at least try to find out somehow if your conversational partner is comfortable with this. But what you're looking for is two dimensions of the same thing. You're basically looking for what are their most deeply held values. What is it that they will not budge from? These are your paradigm. But a paradigm can be conscious. It can be like analytical left brain, conclusions one has become certain of, or it can be a more right brain gestalt feeling that the world is supposed to work a certain way. And big point is not to denigrate either of these paradigms, but to accept that this is holy ground, right? This is holy ground for that person. And there are reasons for that. They may not be good reasons, and their paradigm may not give them a very clear or holistic picture of reality. The same could be said of any of our positions, though. It would be of so much use if people could understand that whatever your position is, there's something fundamentally almost religious about it. Even if you can claim to have a analytically arrived at reason for all your beliefs, all your models are maps of the territory. They are not the territory themselves. And the maps always have the potential of being very wrong, of missing crucial facts. Can we narrow it down? Apparently, but we are quite good at bullcrapping ourselves and not seeing the big picture. And so it is important to be respectful of somebody else's viewpoint and to learn from it as best you can. At least this is if you're looking for synthesis. And if you're looking for synthesis, you're looking for a way that instead of being at each other's throats and destroying our country over stupid things like, the sham that is our American presidency, sorry, it is. I'm becoming more and more convinced of that. And actually get down to how to solve problems. All right. So, a commonality format, an improvement method, and paradigm points or points of resonance. If you're using those three, and if you're using the three principles I mentioned before, then the aim is to synthesize, use the synthesis method, which is to synthesize a point that is not your position, that is not your position, is not the other person's position, but is a synthesis of those two. Again, you might have locked in your beliefs, and this position is purely theoretical and it's not something you're committing to, or it could be something that you're allowing yourself to learn from. Either way, you are building a bridge. That common position is a bridge. Another way to think about this is that everyone has their personal space, their home, their family, and these are very personal things, and hopefully you're amongst those who believe people have a right to that, correct? And that someone shouldn't just storm into your house and take your goods and piss on your carpet. Wow, did I just say that? I guess I did. That's kind of what respect is, right? Not pissing on somebody's carpet. All right. So, sorry. Okay. On the other hand, we probably all want common spaces, spaces that we all respect each other and are welcome to use. These are not the private places where you let everything hang out, although if you wanted to, you may not want to, but these are the places where you make sure everyone respects each other by respecting everyone else. They are the roads, they are shopping, restaurants, any public place you can imagine. So in other words, your private beliefs, those deeply held beliefs, are like your home. So are those of the other person, and you should respect their home. But creating this third point of synthesis between you two is like creating common space. So the ideal is not only that you will be able to have one of these conversations, and not only that a few people will be able to have a few of these conversations, but that as a culture, as groups, we will begin to be able to synthesize our beliefs towards a commons. And note that the commons only includes those things that both parties agree with. And you should be willing to negotiate towards that. If there's a point you find very, very important, work towards synthesizing a version of that which the other person is happy with. Obviously, there's going to be people that will just not budge. That's unfortunate. Maybe work on the reasons why. Ask them. Genuinely try to understand why they would not move their position and why they would not want to have a common position, right? I moved from a fairly conservative, fairly, what's the term? Fundamentalist Christian position at one point in time. And it took me a long time to realize that the fundamentalist position fundamentally does not respect the commons because of the way they are willing to vote their religion into the public sphere, into the common sphere. And well, I'm not gonna go into that any further because I could go into that, and I will at some point. But anyway, synthesis is the goal. Synthesis is the goal. It's the only goal I can imagine that will allow us to move forward, to find peace again, to keep our society from destroying itself, and to keep humanity from destroying our planet. Synthesis has to be our goal. So this is just a rough outline of how it's may be possible, and the attitudes needed to make it possible, because it's a huge attitude shift. If you don't have the attitude, it's never going to work. You have to have the right attitude to bring in order to synthesize beliefs with someone else. But I've provided as many tools as I can think of to help that be palatable, reasonable, and acceptable. So anyway, thank you for your time. Bye.